I like to start the demo from the perspective of someone who has already added accounts to Tiller. So you've started that free trial and you've added a few financial institutions. You can see I have a variety of financial institutions connected to Tiller, investment accounts, credit cards, basic credit union, checking, savings accounts, things like that. So I've already got the accounts linked. The first step when you're getting started with Tiller, once you've got those accounts linked, is to go ahead and create a spreadsheet. So I've got a couple example sheets, a Tiller Foundation template for Excel set up here, which I'll demo when I get to the part of the demonstration where I'll talk through how to set up the template, how to set up the budget for cash flow tracking and budgeting, and how to just kind of use Tiller, because it's already got a lot of demo data in it and it's just easier to go through that demo. But I want to start the session demonstration here with how to move your money or how to move your data from money in Excel. So if that's you, if you've been using money in Excel and you're excited about getting started with Tiller, but you want to migrate that data over, your first step is going to be to click on this create a spreadsheet option here on the Tiller console, sheets.tillerhq.com. And click that Start with Microsoft Excel button there. And that's going to download a fresh copy of the foundation template for Microsoft Excel. And then I'm going to go ahead and just open the Excel application, because in my past demos, when I try to click that downloaded option, it just opens it on my Mac. So I can go to find that download here. It's going to be this one, and I'll go ahead and open it up. Just wait for that to load. So there's a great Getting Started tab in the foundation template that talks through how to install the Tiller Money Feeds add-in to get your data flowing into the spreadsheet. And so if you're familiar with Money in Excel, the template that they offered also used an add-in. So you should be somewhat familiar with add-ins if that's the case. If you're not familiar with add-ins at all, the sheet here talks through how to get that add-in, but the basics are that you can go to the Insert ribbon here in Microsoft Excel and click on My Add-ins, and then click on the Store option here, and then just search for Tiller. And then you should be able to find the Tiller Money Feeds add-in and add it, and then it'll be installed into Microsoft Excel for you. Now I already have it installed, so it shows up on My Add-ins, and it also shows up on the data ribbon here. So I can click the icon for the Tiller Money Feeds add-in to launch it here. And then I need to link this workbook, this foundation template, to the Tiller console in order to make that connection to those financial institutions and accounts that I have connected to Tiller. So I'm just going to click Link Workbook to make that connection. And then I'm going to choose the accounts that I want to link. So the important thing here is that you want to link the accounts that you had linked to the Money in Excel workbook. And so in this case, just for the demo purposes, I'm just going to pick one credit card account. That's kind of how I have the demo set up. So I'm just going to choose this REI card down here, and then I'm going to click confirm. But just make sure you get all those same accounts. If we were able to automate those for you, make sure you link them to the same workbook. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in the data. It's going to spin for a second. It's pretty fast. And then once it stops spinning and the button turns white, then that should mean that it's done. And so it's pretty quick. We've got those transactions in from that REI card here in the transaction sheet. So that's the first step of getting started if you are trying to migrate your data from Money in Excel. The next step is to go ahead and open that Money in Excel template that has the data that you want to migrate. So I'm going to go to the File menu and just open. And I have my Money in Excel migration demo sheet already set up here. So here's my Money in Excel workbook. So the first thing we'll want to do to start this migration process is migrate over our categories. So I'm going to go over to the Categories tab in my Money in Excel workbook, select the first category here, not the header, just the first category, and then hold the Shift key and then select all of those categories in the list there. And I'm just going to use Command C to copy that list. You can also right click and choose copy. And then I'm going to head back over to my Tiller workbook here and go to the category sheet. And then I'm going to just clear out the example categories that were provided in the foundation template, because I just want to move over the categories from my money in Excel workbook. And then now I'm going to go to the home menu here, and it looks like my copy did not persist. Let's go back to the money in Excel workbook. Try that again. Let's try the right Command C. Hopefully that works. It looks like it did. It's got those weird dotted lines. Okay, here we go. Paste, and then we're going to do paste values. So we paste the values in, and that just makes sure that the formatting stays consistent in the foundation template workbook. Next, we're going to do the same thing for the type. So we'll go back to the money in Excel workbook. We're going to select all of the types for our categories, Command or Control C to copy those back in our foundation template. In the type column here, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to paste values. So then we've got our types. And they match pretty well with, they match exactly with the types that are available in the foundation template in Tiller. So the group is something that you're going to want to add to each category. We think about the group as the bigger bucket. And if you are coming from money in Excel and you're used to using subcategories, then you may think about the structure a little bit different. Group is sort of the bigger umbrella, categories fall into that. We'll talk about the subcategories piece when we get to moving the transactions migrated over. You can skip the group assignment step for now, but you should come back to it later. So as far as migrating data goes, our next step is to think about whether or not subcategories are important to us. So here in the transaction sheet, in the money in Excel template, there is this subcategory column. Now, in my example here, I'm not using it. So the subcategories were not important to me. So there's nothing I need to do to copy those over. But what I do want to do is just go ahead and delete this column. If the subcategories were not important to me, then I want to delete this column in the transaction sheet. If those subcategories were important to me, then I will want to insert a column in my foundation template transaction sheet. Just waiting for it to catch up here, to the left of the amount column to be in the appropriate position when I copy and paste those transactions over from the money in Excel template. So if subcategories were important to you, you'll want to insert a column here so that you have the space for the subcategories and that the columns will line up correctly when you copy and paste over. Now, like I said, we don't have subcategories in Tiller. We have more of a group category structure. I got a great question earlier this week about the subcategories, and the way that this person was using it was more appropriate to use tags in the Tiller transaction sheet. So that could be an alternative. If you want to have the historical subcategory data pulled over from the money Excel, just add that template. The steps in the guide that you received, which will also be included in the resources tomorrow, do talk about some additional steps for making sure that the column formatting is correct. So just keep an eye out for that if you plan to move those subcategories over. In my example here, though, I'm not going to move them over. So once again, I'm just going to delete this column because I don't need it. So then my next step, now that I've decided about subcategories, is to figure out if there's an overlap of transactions between money in Excel and what Tiller was able to bring in. So when I first connect accounts to Tiller, it's going to bring anywhere from 30 to 90 days worth of transaction data into our system that you'll pull into the spreadsheet. And if you've sort of simultaneously been using money in Excel, there may be some overlap. You may have that last 30 to 90 days of transactions in your money in Excel workbook that's already categorized. So that's the next step, is just kind of comparing the sheets here. So I can see in my money Excel workbook, the last transaction was on 5/25 from NOC reservations. And then if I scroll down, I can see that it goes back quite some time to January 2021, this 9 Mile restaurant charge here. So then if I compare in my Tiller transaction sheet, I can see that it looks like the tiller feeds brought in 3 transactions that are not in the Money in Excel workbook, and it only goes back to 3/8. So all these transactions between 3/8 and this NOC reservations, I've already got categorized in the Money in Excel workbook. So essentially, I just want to clear everything from the tiller transaction sheet that already exists in the Money in Excel workbook and copy and paste the Money in Excel version of the transactions into my tiller workbook so that I have all that categorized data and I don't have any duplicates. So I'm going to select the first row here for transactions that I'm planning to copy over. I'll select the last one and I just hold down the Shift key to select all those, and then I'll just clear those cells out. So then I just have the 3 that are not in the Money in Excel workbook. Back in our Money in Excel workbook, we're going to select all these transactions here. We're going to start with the first cell of the first transaction's date, and then we're going to scroll down all the way to the bottom here, and we're going to select the cell for the last transaction's account, and then Control C or Command C, and then back on the tiller transaction sheet, we're going to select the first available date cell, and then we're going to do paste special, and then there we want to do values and number formatting. So paste special, values, and number formatting. So we can go ahead and paste that in. And then we've got those transactions that we've already categorized here in our transaction sheet. I think there are some additional columns here that are in the Money Excel that I hid before the demo. So if you have these, account number and institution, you can also paste those over as well from that Money Excel. Just grab those when you do the copy from the Money in Excel sheet. So those are the basics of moving over the Money in Excel data from your Money in Excel template into your tiller transactions sheet, the foundation template, getting it all kind of set up just from the data migration perspective. You may need to sort oldest to newest by the date if for some reason things are not in the appropriate order. I think I did the opposite there, newest to oldest. So then you can make sure that you're looking at everything that's newer here in the transaction sheet. All right, so that concludes the part of the demo for migrating the Money in Excel data. So I'm going to close this. I'm not going to save because I will need to reuse that same sheet next week. And I'm going to close this one, and then I'm going to open up the foundation template here that I have ready for demo to just kind of get you started in how to use the foundation template, how to use tiller for Microsoft Excel. And so that is my tiller foundation template here. Just wait for that to load. All right, so here is my foundation template that I've got set up. I'm using for budgeting, cash flow tracking. And so first I want to share how to keep the data fresh. So how Tiller Money works, how to use it. From the data ribbon, launch this Tiller Money feeds, add in here. Sometimes you'll have to sign in, maybe every day you have to sign into the add-in. You'll be signing into the account that is associated with your Tiller subscription. When there's new data available to fill, the fill button will turn blue here. And that just means that there's new stuff that's not in the transaction sheet yet that you can fill into the transaction sheet. If you open the add-in and you find that it's been a few days, you're not seeing transactions, and this button is not blue, there's not anything available to fill, then you would want to head over to the Tiller console here and refresh any accounts from the account summary that haven't recently refreshed. And so, for example, this Commonwealth One Federal Credit Union, it hasn't refreshed in quite some time. It's having some technical difficulties right now, so I can't actually refresh it, but this is a good example of an account that hasn't refreshed on its own. Whereas this Vanguard account last refreshed 14 hours ago, and I didn't take any action to get it to refresh. So an account's ability to automatically refresh is going to vary by institution, and it's going to vary by the security settings that you have enabled for the bank or that the bank expects you to have enabled. So if you have to use a secondary code that you receive via email or text message to refresh your accounts, then you're going to need to refresh those manually. You're going to need to come here to the Tiller console, click the refresh button, let it do its thing, enter that secondary security code, and then we'll be able to pull the data into our database. So it's really going to vary by institution. Any accounts that can automatically refresh are going to do so on their own about once every 36 hours. So if you go about a day and you come to the console after like a day and you notice that some haven't automatically refreshed, those are the ones that probably can't automatically refresh. Or the occurrence that, like with this one, there's technical difficulties and we may need to contact our data provider, for example. We're always happy to help get institutions working. So just reach out to us using the chat in the lower right of the console. So for those accounts that we come here and we refresh, once we are back in our workbook and we launch this add-in, so let's say I had refreshed some accounts, I need to launch it again. It may not be, immediately obvious if I don't launch it again. And then now that there's new data available, the button turns blue, I can click fill, and then I get those new transactions for the account that had data available. So I'm also just going to sort this again. All right, there we go. So that's the basics of keeping the data fresh, refreshing your accounts, getting the new transaction data into your spreadsheet. To get the template set up for budgeting and cash flow tracking, your first step is going to be to spend some time on the category sheet. Now, if you're coming from money in Excel, you've already moved over and you took those steps to migrate your data. You've already moved over your categories and your types, but this is where you'll need to spend some time setting up groups. Or if you're like, I kind of just want to rethink my whole category structure, you can do that too. You can just go through here and revise this as needed. Of course, if you've already got categorized transactions from migrating data, you would need to correct those on the transaction sheet. But if you're just starting out, spend some time thinking about your categories and your groups. You can see here to kind of demonstrate that hierarchy with the categories and groups, I have a discretionary group here. And then I have a number of categories that fall into that discretionary group. So coffee, gear and clothing, restaurants, things that are discretionary, things that like I don't necessarily need to live and survive. They're just kind of nice to haves. So think about the group as the bigger bucket and the categories fall into that bucket. The types are income, expense, and transfer. Transfers are generally things like a credit card payment. So you can see here, I have a CC payment category and it's, for credit card payments, that's money moving between accounts. It's a transfer. We have a great resource on our Help Center about using transfers. So that's the first step. Get happy with your category setup here. We recommend that you start simple, don't overthink it. You can always change it later. The next step then is to spend some time on your transaction sheet categorizing transactions. So you can do that in a couple ways. You can go into the drop-down menu here and just select the transaction. Once you have a fair amount of transactions categorized, you can also start typing the first few letters of a category and it will try to autofill what it thinks it is. And so I already have a lot of transactions categorized in my demo sheet here, so it goes really nicely. I can also just type the category if I have my category list memorized. And if I have a really simple category list, it makes it even easier to memorize them and just type them in. And it'll let you know if it ends up not being one that's in the list. So this is donations, so it's auto-filling for me there, utilities. So it's pretty quick to just go through and categorize these transactions. We don't categorize transactions for you by default because we can't expect to know the intent of your spending. If you go to Walmart or Amazon, we don't know if that was household, groceries. So we're not going to guess. A lot of tools do that for you and they get it wrong, and that's really frustrating. Coming soon in Microsoft Excel, we will have AutoCat available, which is available in the Google Sheets platform right now. AutoCat allows you to build a customized rule set based on your transaction descriptions and other criteria in your transactions and have it categorize those transactions based on those rules. So it's really handy for automatically categorizing transactions. And we hope to have that available this summer. We're working very hard on it. We have it running in beta. Some of you may get an email from me today about access to the beta release of AutoCat for Excel. So keep an eye out for that. Or just, write to me, beta@tillerhq.com if you're interested in testing out the beta version of AutoCat for Excel. So we're really excited about that. Should be coming soon. So as far as how much data to categorize, now when you first connect your accounts to Tiller, like I said, we'll pull 30 to 90 days worth of transaction data. When all that comes into the transaction sheet, especially if you have a lot of accounts connected. It can be quite a lot of data, and that can feel overwhelming. So there's no need to categorize all of that historical data. You can just start with this week and go forward, this month and go forward. It really just depends on how much insight you want to build. The more you categorize, the more insights you're going to be able to build with the other dashboards in the template. So we do recommend, if you are brand new to budgeting, so you have no idea what your budget target should be, that you categorize last month up to today, because that's going to help you set a baseline for how much you're spending for certain categories to help you figure out what a good budget target is for those categories. So last month up to today at a minimum, otherwise categorize however much you want if you have a good handle on, generally what your budget target should be if you want to use the template for budgeting. So speaking of that, your next step is to spend some time on the category sheet setting your budget targets in column E. If you want to use the tool for budgeting, this is your next step. So here in column E, let's say my cell phone bill is actually more like $85, which I think is correct. So once I enter in $85 here, even though this is for January, I'm putting it in column E to make it really quick to set the budget targets for all the subsequent months. So I've typed in 85. Now we're going to see every subsequent month changed to 85 from that $65. Now all this is a very simple formula referencing the previous cell. So March is referencing February, April is referencing March, and so on. If I need to overwrite that formula that causes the amount to cascade to the right to the subsequent months to set a unique amount for a particular month, I can really easily do that. So let's say for auto and gas in August, for example, my car insurance premium for 6 months is going to be due. And I don't want a separate category for insurance. I want to keep it simple, but I need the budget to be quite a bit higher than $80. So I'm going to enter in $400, which is more realistic for my insurance premium, plus my gas for the month of August, and I'll press enter. Now we see that cascading picks back up in the subsequent month. So we just overwrite the next month, set it back to 80, and then the rest of the months pick back up and we're good. And we've got this unique amount for August for the auto and gas category. So feel free to overwrite those as needed to customize your budget. So I've got my example budget set up here, but if I don't have a sense for what my budget targets should be, and I took the time to categorize last month up to today, I can head over to the monthly budget sheet and I can review last month, which at this point is May, that's selected here in the top of my monthly budget sheet. And I can look at column G, which is the actuals column. And this is going to tell me how much I actually spent on those categories for the categorized transactions for last month. And this can help me set the budget target for those categories. So it looks like my cell phone bill was actually about $80 versus the 85, but that's okay. That was a pretty good target. Otherwise, I can just review the actuals here to decide what the appropriate budget targets should be. Maybe, I really want to be spending less than $150 on restaurants. So this helps me get a baseline point of reference for, should I budget more? Should I budget less? If we look at the current month, we can get a sense for the plan. So this is sort of in the maintenance phase of using Tiller now. You've got your transactions categorized, you've set up the budgets. Now you're just trying to assess, what does the plan look like based on those budget targets I set? So there's some information at the top here that's going to help you understand if you have a good plan set for those budget targets that you set on the category sheet. So the planned cash flow here for June, I'm projecting to have $1,721 left over if everything goes according to plan. If I spend exactly as much as I plan to spend and I earn exactly as much as I plan to earn, I'm going to have a surplus. So that's a pretty good plan. That just means that there's extra money that I'm planning to earn that's not being budgeted toward anything. The cash flow to date is going to move around a lot during the month. So just keep this in mind. As money moves in and out, this number is going to go up and down. I haven't gotten paid yet for the month of June, so that's why it's in the negative, because I've been spending money, but I haven't gotten paid yet. This is most helpful when the month closes to just let us know how we actually did for the month. Here in the middle, we get our spending budget, what we're planning to spend versus what we've actually spent so far this month. So we also see that as a percentage. How much of our expense budget is still available as a percentage based on what we've already spent so far? So 68% of our budget is still left, and we have 29 days left in the period. So this gives us a kind of frame of reference for how we're doing so far this month. Are we getting close to spending what we plan to spend? Are we over what we plan to spend? And then over on the right, we get our income budget versus our income actual. And we haven't gotten paid yet, so that's why the actual is 0. We can scroll down and kind of see how we're doing so far in the month. At the very beginning of the month, it's a little less interesting because not a lot of spending has happened and there probably aren't any overages yet. To demonstrate what it would look like if there were overages, if we go back to May here, since this month has closed out, this is a good indication of our planned cash flow. So, we see that we had $1571 left over based on our actual spending. Even though we were over budget, it's interesting because we actually had a positive cash flow. And so perhaps we just earned a lot. Maybe we earned more than we plan to earn, or I guess we spent more than we plan to spend here, but we still had a positive cash flow. So that's good based on the month closing out. As we scroll down, we can see where we overspent. So there was some maybe unexpected travel spending that happened that we didn't budget for. We spent more on gear and clothing. Perhaps that's one where we're always going over and we kind of need to reel it in a little bit. Same thing with, restaurants. We actually did pretty good. We didn't go over budget on restaurants, which maybe is something that we commonly would go over. Auto and gas, maybe we took an extra trip this month or an extra couple trips, a road trip. Actually, I did take a road trip to visit family in Tennessee. So that's why that one is above and beyond. Groceries, that one's always kind of hard to pin down. So you can use this monthly budget to help you get a sense for where you are during the month. So if this was, let's say we were partway through June and this is what it was looking like so far, then we would know that we need to kind of halt our spending a little bit, or we need to tune our budgets because they weren't realistic. Or we just had unexpected stuff. Excuse me. The yearly budget sheet is really helpful for giving us the big picture view of our finances for the entire year. So we can see here in the top left, we get the budgeted cash flow, which is if everything goes according to plan, what we would have left over for the year. So if we spend exactly as much as we plan to spend and earn exactly as much as we plan to earn, we would have more than $20,000 saved after the end of this year, after December 2022. The actual cash flow here is cash flow to date, how much we have had left over based on our actual earning and our actual spending. So we're probably pretty close to this if this is accurate and realistic spending and earning. So we can use the yearly budget also to kind of think about different scenarios and review a few different months at a time. So one example is that August car insurance payment, right? So we can see how that's going to affect our budgeted cash flow. So the planned cash flow for August is less than that of July and less than that of September. And that's because of that car insurance payment. If you remember, we made that unique for that specific month. So you can use the yearly budget to help you understand what would happen in different scenarios. If you're expecting an increase in income or a decrease in income, what is that going to look like for a year? So this can be a really, really helpful planning tool. And then of course, you can also just scroll down and look at the individual categories, individual groups, and compare a few months at a time. All right, so those are the basics of getting the template set up. And I'll just do a quick recap here. So you're going to make sure that you've got your data filled in to the transaction sheet using the Tiller Money Feeds add-in here from the data ribbon. Or if it's not showing up there, you can always find it from my add-ins once you've installed it. So keeping the data fresh, you've got your categories set up here on the category sheet and you've assigned groups and types. You've set your budget targets in column E and you've customized things as needed for specific months. From there, you can review your monthly budget to see what your plan looks like for the current month. And then you can use your yearly budget to see what your year is looking like. And then the last thing really is just staying on top of categorizing transactions. That's really going to help you keep the information flowing. If you need to refresh any accounts that don't automatically refresh, you do that on the console here, sheets.tillerhq.com, which you can access from our main website by just logging in here at the top. Refresh those accounts, and then that data is available to fill into your spreadsheet. All right, so I think that's everything I had to demo. So let's get some questions. Go ahead and get your questions in the Q&A. Use the Q&A button specifically. Let's see here. Sorry about the echo. I wonder, I'm just seeing that note. Hopefully it's better. I don't know if it's not, I'm sorry. How would I spotlight recurring expenses? Any way to highlight these expenses easily? That's a great question. If there's other questions, go ahead and get them in the Q&A, please. I'd love to take your questions. We don't have live chat support. We don't have live support. Our chat is sort of like message based. So this is your opportunity to kind of get live support. So if you have questions, please get them in the Q&A. So recurring expenses, that's interesting. I know how to do it in Google Sheets, but Microsoft Excel, a little bit different. Let me think for a second here. We don't have it yet, but we are working on an insights sheet that would be added to the foundation template for Microsoft Excel, and it will give you some information about recurring expenses. But it's probably a few weeks out before we have that available, because that is the sort of, we have it in the Google Sheets version of the foundation template, and we've just been slowly kind of getting the Microsoft Excel foundation template up to parity. You could probably do it with a pivot table, but I'm not super familiar with how to build pivot tables in Microsoft Excel. That would be my sort of best guess on how to do it in Excel right now. You could also use, I don't know how it compares, but you could also use simple formulas like count ifs or count I don't know if they have that in Excel. Let me see here if I can figure out the pivot table thing. I think it's under data, right? Let's insert pivot table. We'll do a new worksheet, and then let's see if we do, I want to do description, rows, and then see, can do columns. Nope. There should be some way to like get the count of them, because we just really want a count of these particular descriptions. Yeah, I'm not sure, but that is the best. That's the best I can do right now. Pivot table could help you because you'd get a count of like specific descriptions there. Otherwise, like if you have your categories set up to where you've categorized the transactions, you could also probably use the yearly budget sheet to help you kind of identify where a lot of spending is, and that can help uncover recurring expenses. We don't have a recurring expenses template or sort of automation the way Money in Excel did, but that's a great question. All right. Okay, so Pam asks, please explain the accounts tab. So the accounts tab here is a customization sheet. So you select the accounts that you have linked. It's intentionally blank because it's just there to help you customize things. So you can select the accounts that you have linked to the sheet from the dropdown. If any of them for some reason are incorrect, so let's say that, on the balances sheet here, this was actually a loan account and it was incorrectly classified as an asset, I could use the accounts sheet to apply a class override. I don't need to set this class override column unless the class is wrong for the account. If it's appearing on the wrong side of the asset liability columns here on the balances sheet. Otherwise, I can assign a group. And this is really handy for helping you organize your accounts and have them displayed on the balances sheet in a way that makes sense to you. So for example, let's say I have a credit cards group here, credit cards, and then I have a checking group. Now, when I visit the balances sheet, I can see that my accounts are organized based on those custom groups. So it's handy for just deciding how you want things displayed on the balances sheet. Great if you have investment accounts, real estate, kids' college savings funds, things like that. You can organize it all on the balances sheet. Great question. All right, Sharon asks, I have an Excel spreadsheet I want to migrate in, not Excel money. Can I get individual help getting things migrated over? So we don't offer one-on-one support at this time. We're a pretty small support team. So we can really only help via chat and email. And then we have this live webinar. The basics are going to be about the same. If you have an Excel workbook that you've been using for a long time, the main thing really is just copying and pasting over the data into the appropriate columns. So you maybe need to copy and paste over each column separately to make sure that you put the data in the right place versus being able to just select that big block of transactions from the money in Excel workbook and paste it over. It just so happened that the column order was exactly the same with the exception of the subcategory column. So that made it really easy to copy and paste that data over from money in Excel. But if you have some other workbook, it's really just about matching the columns and copying and pasting. So it should be pretty straightforward. Hopefully that helps, Sharon. Okay, Jim asks, how can you compare year-over-year budgeting? That's a great question too. So the yearly budget sheet, it only shows you 12 months at a time, but I can select the particular 12 months that I would like to review. And so in this case, I do have some actuals categorized from 2021, but I don't have the budget months in the category sheet for 2021. The template does allow you to include more than 12 budget columns in the category sheet. So I can add the additional columns for 2023 out to the right here in the category sheet to start populating my budgets for 2023 if I want to. And then the best thing we have right now for year-over-year comparison for Microsoft Excel is the yearly budget sheet. And so you could just kind of flip back and forth between, one year and the next to just kind of visually review the comparison there. We don't have anything that's just looking at 2 years side by side for Microsoft Excel right now, but that's a great question, Jim. All right, Sharon asks, I'm in Hawaii. Any chance you could do these sessions 1 hour later? I had to get up at 5:45 a.m. and deal with numbers and formulas so early. I totally get that, Sharon. I know that that's really early for you. So this session, this particular time block is really just for this foundations, like getting started. So it's the same every week. So next week, you won't have to get up at 5:45 a.m. to watch the session again because it will be exactly the same. And I'll be sending you an email tomorrow with a link to the recording. So if you want to watch it again at a time when you've had your coffee and things make more sense, you'll have that recording to rewatch what I've discussed here. Future sessions beyond the basics, we can definitely, we have a little more flexibility with the time. This really was the best time specifically for my schedule to be able to do this. So I do apologize if it's really early for you, but I appreciate you attending anyway and getting up. That really shows dedication. That's awesome, Sharon. All right, Joellen asks, I'm a new user and I have had challenges with getting my credit union accounts to flow into Tiller. My larger investment accounts were not a problem. Another question I have is how to get from having those accounts visible, but not yet in the format that Heather is showing. Granted, I missed the first 15 minutes of this and plan to relook at the recording. So as far as getting your smaller credit union accounts connected, that is something you'll probably want to reach out to our support team about. I can't necessarily help you on this call get that working, but what I would recommend is visiting the console and just trying again. If you're not able to add it, just try it again over a few days. Generally, a lot of the errors that we see when folks try to add new accounts and they're getting errors resolve on their own within a few days. So we do recommend that you just keep trying. And if that doesn't help, you can feel free to reach out to us using the chat tool here in the lower right hand corner of the console, send us a message, and then just use the account connection question option here and provide the information that the bot is asking for. The bot really helps us collect a lot of information up front so that the team can be most efficient and get your issue resolved as quickly as possible. So definitely don't be afraid of the bot. You will get a human. It just collects information from you up front to help keep our team efficient. As far as the other question with having those accounts visible, but not yet in the format that I'm showing, definitely the first 15 minutes would help. You probably haven't done the step maybe of downloading your foundation template and then filling it with the data for the accounts that you have been able to connect. So I would definitely recommend watching the recording. And if that doesn't help, any of the emails that you've gotten from me, you can feel free to reply and ask more questions, and myself or another teammate will respond and get you an answer as quickly as possible. All right, Oscar asks, I'm a new customer and I have repeatedly asked for help setting up my bank account. I continue to have a blank page with nothing to select for my bank account. Thanks, Oscar, for writing into us. I'm sorry if you haven't gotten a response back yet. That's definitely unusual. The bot does try to collect that information from you up front. So if you haven't responded to the request for that information, then it doesn't get passed to the teammate. So just double check if you're using the bot that you're providing the information that we're asking for, and then it'll get right over to a teammate. Maybe we've asked you to wait a few more days, like I said, because most of those errors resolve on their own within a few days. And so we do ask for your patience in trying to get those accounts connected if you're running into an error. Otherwise, just providing the information we need can help speed things up. I don't know exactly what you mean by continue to have a blank page with nothing to select for my bank account. There could be a lot of things you're talking about there, and without more specifics, it's really hard for me to provide a recommendation. So if you want to provide some clarifying information about, is it here on the console where you're seeing that blank page? Is it here in the foundation template? Is it in the Tiller Money Feeds add-in where you're seeing the blank page? Giving me a little bit more information can definitely help me point you in the right direction. All right, Lynn asks, when I use subcategories, do I have to add these items to the categories tab when using subcategories? So we don't really support or have a subcategories concept in Tiller. And so if you did decide to move those subcategories over from your Money and Excel workbook, so you added that additional column, just to kind of quickly show this. So when you insert, it inserts left, but then it adopts the data validation from the category column. And this is just kind of like a quirky thing with Excel. So I want to take that data validation out because I don't need it. Where is my data validation? Data validation. Yes. Okay. So I want to apply these all, and then I want to clear all. So I just select this and then I choose clear all on that new column, right? And so this is like subcategories. And maybe you pasted stuff over, it's still showing up. Let me see here, trying to demo this appropriately. Data validation, apply, I want to, no, it's wanting to clear that one. I have to double check on those steps because we don't want the drop-down menu here, basically. But we need it to be in this position. The steps I have documented, like, that's really all I think I'm asking you to do is just, the selection contains cells without data. Do you want to extend the data validation to these cells? No, clear all, okay. Okay, there we go, no data validation. So maybe this is like, this is, I don't know, subcategory conservation or something like that. So in Tiller, we don't have a concept of subcategories. So as you can see, there's no subcategories. The structure that we use is group and category and type, right? So if you look at the monthly budget sheet, then you see type, which is income or expense, and then you see group. So we have our bills group, there's that discretionary group that I was talking about. And then we have the categories under those groups. The way that we think about subcategories is more closely in line with the way that we think about or might talk about tags. So like in the Tiller community, there's some different solutions out there that mention the use of tags. And so the way that I've seen folks writing in about the subcategories so far when they're coming from Money in Excel is more like the way that we think about tags. And so it's really just for historical purposes. It's not going to show up anywhere in the budget dashboards. You don't need to move them over to the category sheet. They're really just sort of standalone text here in the transaction sheet that's there for your archival purposes. There are some, probably some reports and community built solutions that will be built that will leverage tags. And so if you're using subcategories as like a more granular level than the category, then you would want to kind of go that way. Whereas if you were using, thinking about like your category is the broader level, and then your subcategory is the more granular level, which is very similar to what I just said, you may want to think about your categories being your groups, because the group in our sort of schema, the group is the bigger bucket and the category is the smaller bucket. So just keep that in mind when you're transitioning your data over. You may need to rethink like how you interact with the subcategories and categories versus categories and groups. Hopefully that makes some sense. All right, Michael asks, where and how do I track the information for my investment accounts? Also, separate question, can this program generate visual aids like pie chart? My wife loves pie charts. Okay, awesome. So many people love pie charts. We get that all the time. So as far as information from your investment accounts, we can connect to many of the bigger investment institutions, Fidelity, Vanguard, I have those connected. And we can pull in the balance information. So that would appear here. If you connect it to the same workbook as you have your, just everyday spending accounts, it can show up here on your balances sheet. The transactions, you're going to get those different kind of transactions that maybe you don't really need to track in your budget. So one neat thing about the foundation template is that you can mark certain categories as hide in this hide from reports column. And that can just help with, you don't really need to see those investment transactions showing up here on your monthly budget sheet, for example. You can hide them using that hide from reports column. Generally, they're transfers anyway, I think most of the time. Maybe sometimes they're earnings. It just depends on like what you've got going on with your investments. And so use that hide option there, or you can just have a totally separate workbook just for your investment transactions. Now, if you're investment accounts and tracking investments, if you're speaking specifically about your holdings and your stock positions and things like that, we don't have a feed for holdings right now. We do hope to have that available in the future. It is something that's on our roadmap. I don't have a timeline for it, but it is coming. As far as pie charts go, we don't have anything in the foundation template out of the box, but there is a show and tell solution on the Tiller community that does have a pie chart, and I think you will love it. So if you're not aware of the community, you can go to community.tillerhq.com, and this is a place where other Tiller customers are sharing what they've built, sharing their workflows. You can find all kinds of examples of how people are using Tiller, lots of help here as well. If you have questions about how to extend your Tiller workbook and your Tiller feeds. And so we have a Microsoft Excel show and tell section here. And so if you go into the show and tell section, this category tracker, this is a community built solution, meaning you get support for it. The documentation for it is in the community. It's not something that you can write in using the chat to get help with. It's all community built and supported, but it shows what's possible with Tiller. And here is your beautiful pie chart there. So there are some steps here for how to insert this category tracker worksheet into your workbook, your foundation template. It is compatible with the foundation template, and using these steps, you should be able to just drop it right in. You don't need to do, if you're new to Tiller, you don't need to do the steps here for the Excel tables. Those Excel tables are already set up in your foundation template by default, but you do need to do the steps here for inserting the worksheet. So there's your pie chart. Hopefully that helps. Okay. All right. So Ron says, I don't have the monthly budget sheet in my workbook. How do I add it? So most likely, if you're not seeing that, it may be because you started in a blank workbook. And doing so it's an awesome feature of the Tiller Money Feeds add-in, but there's not an easy way to add those additional sheets in. My recommendation would actually be to just start fresh in a downloaded copy of the foundation template workbook, because trying to move the monthly budget sheet into your workbook is going to be a lot of steps, and it's very kind of complicated because there's a lot of dependencies on other sheets. Like the monthly budget sheet needs the category sheet, for example, in order to work. And so it's not just copying in one sheet, it's multiple sheets, maybe setting up those Excel tables, that kind of thing. So I would just recommend go to the console here, click Start with Microsoft Excel, download the Microsoft Excel foundation template, fill the data in, and kind of go through the steps that I just demoed for getting it set up. So hopefully that helps. Ron, all right, that was the last question there. It looks like there's some stuff happening in the chat. I think I just answered Ken's question here about the monthly budget tab. Where did it come from? How is it created? And then I think Ron had the same question. I'm really curious how, I don't know if anyone can share context, but in the chat, or if there's other questions, feel free to get them in the Q&A. I'm happy to hang out for a few more minutes. I know we're just a little bit over the block time, but always happy to chat, Taylor, and help people out. I'm curious how folks are getting in that space of starting in a blank workbook. I think like most of the workflows that we recommend have you starting with Microsoft Excel and downloading this. And so I'm just curious how you ended up in a blank workbook. Like what prompted you to open a blank workbook and launch the ad in there and fill it? Because I've seen that a few times. And so I'm just wondering if there's something in our onboarding or help content that's confusing people, because we do recommend that you just start with the foundation template because it's got everything already built into it. So feel free to write me, respond to maybe an email you got from me letting me know like how you ended up in that blank workbook, because I'd love to know. I don't want folks to get confused and then have to kind of start over too. So all right, well, it looks like that was everything. There aren't any other questions. I appreciate you all joining me today for this webinar. Look out for that quick survey and look out for that email from me tomorrow with the recording and link to resources. I hope you all have a great day. Have a great day. See ya.